Alright guys, and welcome back to the channel, and today I will be giving you my full card predictions and full card breakdown for UFC 313 live Saturday, March 8th from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, and I absolutely cannot wait to get into this, so we are going to go ahead and jump right into the very first fight of the night, which is Ray Tsuruya versus Joshua Van, and a fantastic fight here at flyweight. Ray Tsuruya looking very impressive. He is streaking 10-0, picking up some excellent wins against Carlos Hernandez by unanimous decision, Nishiyu Jiseu on the road to the UFC. Before that, Mark Climaco by decision on the road to UFC. So the kid has looked very impressive, 10-0 for a reason. And then we look at the other side here, and we are looking at the incredibly dynamic and very, very impressive Joshua Van. This kid has been an absolute storm since he has come into the UFC. He's had one little hiccup when he fought Charles Johnson. He had a great fight, very competitive fight, really bringing it to Charles Johnson, and then he got caught at the last portion of that fight with a big punch. But outside of that, Joshua Van has been an absolute killer, picking up the huge win over Edgar Chairez and then Cody Durden, which was about a month ago or so. Back before that, Felipe Burns and then Kevin Borjas. And I mean, Joshua Van is just, I mean, the kid is fantastic. His striking is phenomenal. His combinations are phenomenal. His shots to the head, rips to the body. He mixes it up so well, and the kid is just so impressive. And as the fight goes, he just wears on you, and he wears on you, and he starts ripping to the body, ripping to the head. Beautiful technique, beautiful defense, beautiful hands, and the kid is only 23 years old, and I mean, he is only going to get better, and he's only going to improve that already phenomenal technique that he has. And I mean, I just absolutely love Joshua Van. I see so much potential for the kid, and he is a nightmare and a handful to deal with on the feet. And even though Ray Tsuruya is streaking at 10-0, I am never really going to pick against Joshua Van. I have picked him in every single one of his fights, and I have hit on all of those fights outside of Charles Johnson, and I think he is just a storm on the feet. The striking, the body shots, the combination, the technique, it's just too good. So I am going to pick Joshua Van by decision. I think he will probably pick up a 30-27 unanimous decision. He might have a close round with Ray off the bat. Could go to Ray possibly if Joshua takes a little time to get going. But once he settles in, he's just going to take over that fight, and he's going to win it at the least a 29-28 unanimous decision. All right, and we are moving on up to Curtis Razor Blaydes versus Rizvan Kuniev, and a interesting fight here at heavyweight. Curtis Blaydes, unfortunately coming off the loss to Tom Aspinall, the very quick turnaround knockout loss from their original fight a few years ago when Aspinall unfortunately blew out his knee. But before that, he did pick up the pretty impressive knockout win over against Jailton Almeida. Jailton shot in against the cage, and Curtis was just able to elbow him out, pretty much out cold against the cage. Before that, he did get knocked out by Sergey Pavlovich, and then back a few years ago, he got knocked out by Derek Lewis. But outside of that, I mean, Curtis Blaydes has been knocked out a few times, but he is still very solid. He's a great wrestler. He's got power in his hands, and he mixes it up very well. And then on the other side here, we have Rizvan Kuniev, and, he's been looking pretty impressive outside of this win that was originally going to be a win against Renan Ferreira over in PFL, but he tested positive for a banned substance. I don't know exactly what it was. I'm assuming it was maybe anabolic steroids. I doubt it was something got mixed into my supplement. It was probably just straight a banned substance, so that's never a good look. But he did get that fight overturned, and then after that, he picked up a win on Dana White's Contender Series against Hugo Cunha. And from the tape I've watched of him, he looks pretty solid, pretty decent, good striking on the feet, pretty solid power. Nothing super standout. He's not very fast. He's kind of a little bit on the slower end, but he has been putting it together and picking up these wins outside of the fight that was overturned. And in this fight, I kind of went back and forth on it because, Curtis Blaydes, he can be a little up and down, but he is still a very solid, dangerous veteran, and when Curtis is on, he is on, and that, his ability to mix in the wrestling, his ability to mix in his power shots and his striking, he is a problem. And, looking at the tape of Kuniev, I wasn't super impressed by what I was seeing, and then to know that he doped in this fight over in PFL just about 2 years ago, it's not a good sign. I don't like seeing that from a fighter, especially a debuting fighter, and he's coming up against a very skilled veteran in Curtis Blaydes. And, in this fight, I think Curtis is probably going to have the edge in the striking. I think he's going to probably have the edge in the wrestling. He's just going to have to be careful not to get caught up in any kind of a brawl with this guy or get backed up against the cage, because some of Kuniev's best work is kind of coming up against the cage on guys, just being able to outbox them, kind of trap them there. And I think Curtis, if he's able to mix in his striking and his wrestling well enough without getting caught, I think he can get this win. And I'm going to go ahead inside with Curtis Blaydes by decision in this fight. I think it could be pretty close. I think it could be a competitive fight. Rizzovan could wind up coming in and really bringing it to him and really making it tough and showing, a really solid level there. And he could wind up maybe stealing this fight. It could be a close split decision. But I'm going to go ahead and stick with Curtis and give him a chance to bounce back from the really hard, quick Tom Aspinall knockout and just see if he can get back on track against Kuniev here. So I'm going to go ahead and say Curtis Razor Blaydes by decision on this one. And we are moving on up to Marion Santos versus Francis Fire Marshall. And big fight here at featherweight. And, Francis Marshall came in, looked pretty decent on the Contender Series. Had a good decision, unanimous decision win over Connor Matthews. Marcelo Rojo, he was able to knock out. But then he wound up losing a split decision to William Gomis and then taking the hard TKO beatdown from Isaac Delgarian. But he got back on track against Dennis Pazukian, who trains over with Aljamain Sterling and Matt Serra and all those guys over at Team Serra. So, that was a very impressive win for Francis Marshall. But then Marion Santos had a win on the Contender Series that was a knockout of the year candidate. The guy's name was, it was Con Oakley. That's what it was. And I remember this knockout. He came rushing in on Marion Santos, and Marios cracked him with a left hook, bent his head back, slumped him straight down on his knees, out cold. Vicious power there. And, in this fight, even though Francis Marshall's been a little up and down, he did come in off the Contender Series off some good wins and then picked up a good recent win over Dennis Pazukian. The power that Marion Santos showed in that last fight was scary. That is like one touch, jack your head back, break your neck, and kill you kind of power. And before that, the win over against Rafael Barbosa and LFA. And, he's 14-1. And, that knockout was so impressive, and that's a different kind of power. And in this fight, even though Francis Marshall's looked pretty decent, good boxing, some good grappling, I am going to side with the power of Marion Santos in this fight because that left hook was devastating. That is the kind of power where you go, you need to look out for that power. That kid is going to be, he's going to be a small up-and-coming problem, a fire that's going to start to grow. And I think in this fight, I think it's going to be competitive, for a little bit. And then I have a feeling that Francis Marshall is going to wind up coming in the second round and getting caught with a big shot and TKO'd. I think the first round will be pretty competitive. Could be a real close round. This could go to Francis. And it looks like he's kind of, he's kind of hanging in there and picking up some steam. But I think that he is just playing with a ticking time bomb. He's going to be coming in, and eventually Marion Santos is going to throw that grenade at his face, and he's going to hurt Francis Marshall. He's going to drop him, and he's going to TKO him. So I am going to say Marion Santos knocks out Francis Marshall in the second round, possibly the first round, but I'm going to give it about a round for that bomb to go off and Francis Marshall to literally be laying on the ground on fire, struggling, So we are going to go Marion Santos by second round KO on this one. All right, and moving on up, we are looking at Alex Morono versus Carlos Leal, and a very interesting fight here at welterweight. Alex Morono is pretty much a UFC veteran at this point. I mean, he's been around a long time. He is a solid fighter. He's one of those, pretty good at a lot of things, but not great at any one thing. He's just a solid, nicely well-rounded fighter. Pretty good striking, good jiu-jitsu when he needs it. You know, nothing super special, nothing super standout, nothing very dangerous. He's just a tough, well-rounded guy. And then Carlos Leal has looked very impressive on his wins outside of the UFC. I looked at some of the tape on him, you know, and he's got good boxing, good striking, he's got good power, you know, and he's knocked out quite a few guys over in the LFA. It looks like the UAE. You know, one of the knockouts, he got the guy up against the cage, just ripping shots on him, and, you know, very good boxing. And then back a few months ago, he had the fight with Rinat Fakhretdinov, and that was actually a bad call by the judges. In that fight, Carlos Leal was winning that fight. He was pretty comfortably ahead. You know, Fakhretdinov had moments where he was kind of hanging in there, but it was pretty clear that Carlos Leal was ahead in the fight. And I remember watching it going, yeah, he should be winning this. I believe it was at least a 29-28 unanimous decision, no question. And when it went to the scorecards, the judges wound up giving it to Fakhretdinov. So Carlos Leal got screwed in that fight. And, you know, in this fight with Alex Morono, even though he is a very, you know, pretty tough, you know, good mid-card fighter to have to deal with, Alex Morono does struggle. You know, he's had a lot of losses lately. Split decision loss to Daniel Rodriguez, decision loss to Nico Price, where he just looked terrible in that fight. I thought he would look much better in that fight. Nico Price is not that good. Nobody should be really losing to Nico Price. And I thought Alex Morono would come in there and kind of handle him, and he just looked flat, and Nico Price just kind of steamrolled him. Before that, he did pick up the win against Court McGee, but then had the loss to the up-and-coming and hotly, well, not really up-and-coming, but just hotly streaking Joaquin Buckley. And, you know, in this fight, I think Alex Morono is going to come into this fight and he's going to hit a bit of a wall. I think he's going to be behind in the striking. I think Carlos Leal is going to be faster. He's going to have the better combination. He's going to have a little more youth on his side. And I think he's just going to outpoint Alex Morono in this fight. Alex Morono is a very, you know, he moves a lot in his fights. He's got a lot of movement, a lot of back and forth. But I think Carlos Leal is just going to kind of be able to, you know, kind of follow him, stay in his face, and outstrike him. Sometimes Alex Morono can get a little off balance, a little herky-jerky, and I think Carlos Leal will just be the sharper, technical, better boxer, and I think he will win the decision in this fight. I'm going to say he'll probably win a 30-27 unanimous, but at the least a 29-28. All right, so Leal by decision there, and we are moving on up. Cruising right on up this card here to Ozzy Diaz versus Jordan Santos. I don't know if that's D Jordan or if that D is silent. I'm going to assume the D is silent, but we'll say Jordan Santos. And in this fight here, you know, Ozzy Diaz having the tough loss back a few months ago. He got caught by Mingyang Zhang, who is an absolute killer, one of the hottest prospects out of Asia right now. I mean, the guy is just an absolute Terminator with his power, so he's a handful to deal with, you know, just no matter who you are, and he is going to be a problem in the division. He got caught and put to sleep. Put away pretty early in that fight. But before that, I did go and look up some tape on Ozzy Diaz, and he's got pretty good boxing. He's got good power. He's got good striking. He knocked out Bevan Lewis, who used to be in the UFC. Before that, Chuck Campbell. So he's got pretty decent hands. And I could not find a whole lot of tape on Jordan Santos, but I was able to watch some highlights from his contender fight with Will Curry, and pretty good boxing there. Looked pretty solid, and he is sitting at 10-1. And I kind of went back and forth on this fight because Ozzy Diaz has pretty good hands, and he does have power. And there is a world where I could see him coming in and catching Jordan Santos, you know, and knocking him out. This could be an underdog upset where everybody's really counting him out and he pulls this off. But just kind of looking at the highlights of Jordan and then Ozzy Diaz and him getting caught by Mingyang Zhang, I'm going to go ahead and side with Santos because I feel like he's probably going to be the more well-rounded guy here. I think he'll probably be better on the feet, and he will probably be better in the grappling. But if this entire fight plays out on the feet, I could see a world where Ozzy Diaz just kind of brings that dog, puts that pressure on him, and catches him with a shot. Maybe just outstrikes him for 3 rounds. It's very possible. But I see from the little bit of footage I could see from Jordan, I see a little more upside in what he did in his Contender Series performance. And I'm not going to fully count Ozzy Diaz out for getting knocked out by Mingyang Zhang. If that was anybody else, he would have probably done a little better. But I'm going to go ahead and just side with the kid from Dana White's Contender Series. Dana signed him for a reason. I'm sure his other performances, even though I couldn't find a whole lot of tape on them, which, yeah, like Thunder Fight, I've never seen any tape from any Thunder Fight promotion, so that must be why it's hard to find stuff on him. I could not find anything on YouTube, really. But I'm just going to go ahead and stick with Jordan Santos here and say that he picks up the decision. But there is a possibility Ozzy Diaz comes out and winds up just putting hands on him and TKOing him. But I'm going to stick with Santos, not 100% confident in this one, but I'm just going to give the kid a shot at 10-1, and Dana signed him for a reason. All right, and we are moving on up to Bruno the Hulk Ferreira versus Arman Petrosyan. And now we are really getting into the meat of this card and some of the big firepower here, and a big fight here at middleweight. Now, Arman Petrosyan, you know, kind of mid-level guy, nothing special about him not at all, not that good. You know, he is coming off some very hard losses. The most recent loss was the double spinning back fist from Sharbulat Nurmagomedov, man. It was absolutely crazy. Came in, Magomedov threw, I think, a right spinning back fist and then a left, or it might have been vice versa, and then dropped him. The first double spinning back fist KO in UFC history. It was incredible. Caught him, dropped him bad, TKO'd him there. Then he lost to Rodolfo Vieira. Had a few wins before that looked pretty good, and then the loss to the up-and-coming and streaking Caio Borralho. But Bruno the Hulk Ferreira, man, I mean, this kid, he is short. He's not super short. I mean, he's 5'10", but he is compact, and he truly is a Hulk. He has cannon power in his hands. He has that death touch in his hands. And, you know, in this fight, you know, Arman is, you know, he's solid in a few ways. He hangs in there, but he's just, he doesn't have the best striking. He doesn't have a whole lot of power in his hands, and he doesn't have that good of grappling. And with somebody as explosive as Bruno Ferreira with that cannon power, and he actually has the reach advantage on Arman Petrosyan, even though it's only an inch, I think Bruno Ferreira has all the ability in the world to catch Arman Petrosyan with a big, nasty cannon shot and knock him out, and I think that's what's going to happen. I just can't see Petrosyan lasting that long on the feet with him, and I really cannot see him winning a decision against a much faster and a much more powerful striker. And, you know, the fact that he got knocked out by a double spinning back fist like that, and he's been knocked out before, I think Bruno Ferreira is going to come out and put the hands on him, put the cannons on him, and I think he is going to land a laser beam on him and knock him out. So we are going to go Bruno Ferreira, the Hulk, by first round KO. All right, and now we are moving on up to one of the most anticipated fights on the card, and I absolutely cannot wait to talk about this because this is going to be one of the best fights of the night. This is such a good matchup, such a mirror matchup, and we have Jalin the Tarantula Turner versus Ignacio Bahamondes, and you want to talk about two of the best strikers in the lightweight division. These kids are on absolute fire. They are so good, so talented. Ignacio Bahamondes has just been looking like a killer, knocking out Manuel Torres, Christian Chiagos with the head kick. He did lose the fight to the very tough Ludovic Klein, but before that, I mean, he was just on fire, and he still is. I mean, the kid has great striking, great range, very long, 6'3" with a 75-inch reach, and I mean, his boxing looks great. His ability to mix it up on the feet looks so smooth. But then you look at Jalin Turner, and he is one of the most impressive young prospects to step in to the lightweight division in years. I love this kid, and even though Jalin Turner has struggled, it has been kind of a series of unfortunate events that have led to these losses, and most of them. And, you know, he was on a good streak for a little while, but then he had the very close fight with Mateus Gamrot. You know, Mateus is a handful for anybody with his grappling and his pace. And then he had the fight with Dan Hooker, and that was an absolute war. Now, Jalin was winning the early half of that fight. He came out, I believe it was in the second round, he cracked Dan Hooker with a shot, hurt him bad, was putting the pressure on him, cracking him, hurting him. Dan was cut, Dan was bleeding, Dan was hurt. And Jalin had that fight. He had that fight in the bag, and then he started to kind of wilt a bit, and then Dan Hooker came back and cracked him and hurt him, and then Jalin lost a little bit of his steam, and then Dan Hooker was able to come back and just put the pressure on him, and eke out a very close split decision. And Dan did get that win. He did earn that win by coming back, cracking Jalin. And, he just brought out that classic Dan Hooker dog. But Jalin looked very good in the early half of that fight. I think he had a little bit of an issue with his weight cut in that fight, and he just didn't really have the gas. And then he picked up the huge knockout over Bobby Green, which is, a big milestone because it's very hard. It's historically been very hard to knock Bobby Green out because he has some of the best defense in lightweight history. I mean, his head movement, his body movement, he's so good with that. But now younger, faster strikers are starting to catch up to Bobby and catch his timing and knock him out. And he blasted Bobby and gave him a lot of big shots on the ground. Didn't want to do the extra damage, but the ref kind of forced it. So he's like, all right, I'm going to do more damage, if I have to. And then he had the insanely frustrating loss to Renato Moicano, a fight that he had won, that he had in the bag, zip sealed, sent and delivered. He had that fight won, and he made the critical mistake of dropping Moicano and walking away. And you cannot walk away from your opponent until the referee steps in between you or the referee pulls you off. Because at any moment, your opponent could recover. Your opponent could wake up, come up behind you while you're kind of walking away, recover, get back in that fight, and now you're in trouble. And that's what happened. He dropped Moicano, and he did not want to do any more. What it was is he felt bad about having to give Bobby Green extra damage in that fight. So he didn't want to do the same thing to Moicano. So when he dropped him, he was hoping one punch, Mark Hunt style KO, let me walk off. But it backfired. Moicano recovered, Moicano got up, and Moicano beat him. So Jalin had that fight won, but it was just a critical mistake that cost him. If he had followed up and threw a few more shots on the ground, that fight is done, over, he beats Moicano, no problem. So I am not going to hold most of these losses against Jalin Turner with a whole lot of weight because they were very close fights that he had won or almost had won, and then they just got stolen at the last second. Beating Hooker, and then Hooker wound up coming back and just stealing the fight. Had Moicano hurt and beat, and then he walked away, and Moicano came back. So in this fight, it is just so close. It's such a good matchup, and I went back and forth on this, and I normally do not pick against Ignacio Bahamondes, but Jalin Turner just has the power in his hands, his frame, his reach, his length, man. He's just so good when he's on and when he's not making mistakes. And even though Ignacio Bahamondes is such a tactician on the feet, I am still going to believe that Jalin Turner can get back on track. These losses are not terrible. They are not defining who he is. They've just been a series of unfortunate little events. And I think Jalin Turner, when he's on and, his cardio's on point, his hands are on point, that kid is a nightmare. He's a problem. And I think this is going to be a back and forth war. I think it's going to be a fantastic 15-minute fight. And even though it's very close and it could go either way, I am going to side with Jalin Turner to get back on track. I think he can find the slightly bigger power shots, mix it up just a little more, but if Jalin Turner does not come into this fight firing on all cylinders, if he has any problems cutting weight, if he comes in, lackadaisical, if he comes in not really putting everything out there, Ignacio Bahamondes will come back and pick him apart for the win. And it's very live on the table for Bahamondes to win. I think this could be a very close split decision fight. But I'm going to give Jalin a chance to make up for that Renato Moicano horseshit, a fight that he very much had won. And I'm going to say that he can put the pressure on Bahamondes, mix it up with his shots, rip to the body, rip to the head, rip kicks, and I'm hoping Jalin can pull this decision out and get back on track. So we're going to go Jalin Turner by decision here. All right, and we are moving on up to Bobby King Green versus the up-and-coming streaking Mauricio Ruffy, man, and what an absolutely awesome fight we have here at lightweight. Now, Bobby King Green, UFC veteran, been around a long time, had a lot of wins, a handful of losses, but Bobby Green is getting up there in age. He is 38 years old, he is pushing 40, and Mauricio Ruffy is the up-and-coming, almost the new Conor McGregor. His style, his frame, the way he moves in the cage, the way he throws his shots, he's like the Brazilian McGregor. And he has looked very impressive. Had some vicious knockout wins over on Dana White's Contender Series. Then he had the nasty, vicious TKO win over against Jamie Malarkey. And then he had the unexpected kind of Really tough fight with James Lomtop, but James Lomtop, even though he's not that good offensively, he's just tough. He can take a beating. And Mauricio Ruffy was not able to put him away, but he just beat on him for 15 straight minutes. And in this fight, if this fight was happening a few years ago, I would actually be siding with Bobby Green to be, the younger, the veteran with the slicker head movement, the good defense, throwing that jab out there, just machine gunning that jab, dodging out of the way of these shots, just rolling off. And, I would give Bobby Green much more of a chance. But Bobby Green is starting to get to a point now where he is starting to get caught by younger, faster, slicker fighters. Drew Dober was able to catch him and knock him out. Jalin Turner caught him and knocked him out. Dustin Poirier caught him and knocked him out back a few years ago. And, Bobby Green is just starting. I think his speed, I think his reflexes are starting to kind of fade a bit. And when you fight these up-and-coming young, slick strikers with precision sniper power, it gets real dicey because you might be moving and jiving and ducking for a little bit, but then when you get clipped with that wrong shot, you're hitting the ground. And I think in this fight, even though Bobby Green is historically been one of the best defensive fighters the UFC has ever seen, I think his age is catching up to him. He's starting to lose a bit of a step, and a precision sniper puncher like Mauricio Ruffy is going to touch your chin eventually. And I think Mauricio Ruffy is going to get through a pretty competitive first round with Bobby Green, and then somewhere in that second round, he's going to land a laser, drop Bobby Green, and he will take another loss at 38. Bobby Green, a legend, veteran, been around a long time. He's done great things, but I think the new breed of striker is going to be a problem for him at 38. So we are going to pick Mauricio Ruffy by KO in the second round. All right, and moving on up, we were looking at Amanda Lemos versus the up-and-coming streaking Yasmin Lucindo in a very interesting fight at strawweight here. Amanda Lemos has been very, very solid over the last few years of being in the UFC. She's had a lot of good wins. Michelle Waterson, Mariana Rodriguez, and then a few tough losses. Zhang Weili beat her. That was a dominant fight. I mean, Amanda Lemos looked awful in that fight. Didn't do a thing. Got completely blown out of the water. Picked up the win against Mackenzie Dern, which is, pretty impressive now where Mackenzie's at. And then did lose the fight to the Black Widow Jiu-Jitsu machine, Verna Jandiroba. But on the other hand here, Yasmin Lucindo has been streaking. I mean, picking up the very close win against Mariana Rodriguez, who's a great striker, one of the best Muay Thai strikers in the female division, and then picking up the win against Karolina Kowalkiewicz, who's a UFC veteran, been around a long time. Then Poliana Viano by submission arm triangle. So this is a battle of the young up-and-coming prospect versus the kind of aging veteran. And, in some of these fights, sometimes these aging veterans can show the young buck, hey, I still have it. And they can put a pressure and put a pace and put a game on them that's very hard to deal with. But Amanda Lemos is kind of in this spot where it's kind of hard to tell, is she going to fully start to fall off, or is she going to kind of be win-lose, win-lose, win-lose until she retires? She's never going to be a champion. She's never going to be a top fighter. But, I don't think all hope is gone for her. But when you're fighting a young and up-and-coming prospect that's beating names like this that, Lucindo has, I think that can be kind of a problem. And, she's got the youth, she's got a slight reach advantage on Amanda Lemos, and I think this could be a really close back-and-forth fight. It could be a very close fight, and I'm anticipating it will be. But I am going to side with the younger, up-and-coming, streaking fighter. If Amanda Lemos was maybe 2 or 3 years younger, I would say, she probably still has a good chance in this fight. But she's starting to age. She's probably starting to decline a little bit. And I'm going to say Lucindo just comes in, outstrikes her on the feet, clinches her, holds her against the cage, and just outworks her. And I think Yasmin Lucindo is going to pick up a unanimous 30-27 decision, at the very least a 29-28. Possibility it's a very close fight. Possibility Amanda Lemos comes out and just looks really good, and back on track and gets this win and shows the young buck like, hey, this old girl still has some power and still has some fight left in her. But I'm going to stick with Yasmin Lucindo to pick up this win by decision. All right, and now we are up to our co-main event of the evening, and wow, I cannot wait to talk about this fight, and this fight just got made a few hours ago. Unfortunately, we lost the fight of the year, guaranteed. Dana, write the bonus checks for fight of the year. Go ahead and pre-write them. we lost the fight between Justin Gaethje and Dan Hooker, one of the most anticipating all-out battle, bloody wars that we could ever hope and want as MMA fans. And I was so looking forward to that fight, just like all of you were. It was going to be one of the biggest selling points of this pay-per-view, pretty much 50% of the selling point of this pay-per-view outside of Alex, for this absolute war. And then unfortunately Dan Hooker broke his hand and pulled out, and then they were scrambling for a replacement, and it was looking like it was either going to be Renato Moicano or Rafael Fiziev. Even though Rafael Fiziev has not fought in a year and a few months, he has been out a long time because he blew out his knee against Mateusz Gamrot. I believe it was Mateusz Gamrot. And he's been on the shelf for quite a while. And Justin Gaethje is coming off the vicious, all-time greatest one-punch KO of all time, no question now, against Max Holloway, one of the most devastating, brutal knockouts of all time. And Justin Gaethje has already taken so much damage in his career. He gives one to take one. He takes all this damage to give us exciting fights, but you look at Justin Gaethje and look at all the damage he's taken over the years that he's been in the UFC, and you're like, God, man, he is just begging for CTE when he gets older, and he's definitely going to have it. But Gaethje is still a dog. He's still a machine. He's still just an absolute problem to deal with in there. And Gaethje's just so fun. He's a fan favorite. But, I look at this fight, and this is a rematch from back about 2 years ago or so. And this is only about 3 fights removed. So, yeah, about 2 years ago when him and Fiziev first fought, and that was a razor-close fight. It was a very competitive fight, very, very competitive, and I actually had Fiziev winning that fight 29-28. I thought he won that fight. He was faster, he was sharper, his kicks, the first 2 rounds were very close. I thought Fiziev won that first round. The second round was very, very razor close, could have gone either way. And then Justin clearly won the third round. Justin really started finding his timing in the third round and busting Fiziev up. Fiziev started to lose a little bit of his speed and his reflex, and Justin really started to land some big shots on him, busted his eyebrow open and stuff. So it was a close fight, competitive fight. A case for Gaethje, but I thought Fiziev kind of edged it. But not a big deal, not a robbery at all. And in this fight, I went back and forth on it because I'm like, Justin Gaethje was already training for Dan Hooker. He already had a tremendous training camp, and he's been ready to go. But Justin Gaethje is 36 years old. He's coming off the worst knockout of his life, a brain-damaging knockout. And it's hard. We know Justin's going to come into the fight and be Justin. He's not going to lose a step. He's not going to be reserved. He's not going to be stiff and frozen and one-dimensional. He's going to be Justin. But that knockout is life-changing. He face-planted on his forehead and literally skated forward and just rested on his face. Absolutely brutal, devastating shot. And, even though Rafael Fiziev has not fought since, I think it was September of 2023, he was originally rumored and scheduled to have a fight at the beginning of this month. So his comeback was already in the process. So he had to have been training. I know he's at least in some fight shape. He trains over in Thailand. He's one of the best Muay Thai fighters in the UFC. So he's always in shape. And I'm assuming he's been training for his comeback that was supposed to happen at the beginning of this month, but fizzled out. So I'm not going to believe that Fiziev is completely out of shape and just has no chance in this fight, because he is a machine. He is a compact Muay Thai Terminator. His speed is incredible. His kicks are incredible. And it is hard to deal with. And Justin was struggling to deal with it in that original fight. He was having moments where he was getting caught with kicks, getting caught with shots. Fiziev hit him with a big knee. And normally, I would never pick a fighter who has been on the shelf so long, coming in at so last second to fight a guy who just had a full training camp and is about to fight one of the toughest dudes in the division in Dan Hooker. But I went back and forth on it, and I am actually going to pick Rafael Fiziev in this fight, because I think even though he's been off for so long, I don't think he's going to come in with ring rust. I don't think he's one of those fighters. I think those reflexes and that speed is inherently built in. It's hard to deal with early. And as long as he stays sharp against Justin Gaethje, he can land the knees, he can land the kicks, he can land these fast twitch muscle shots. And he's got the matrix defense where he dodges out of kicks and stuff. He's so good at that, and his reflexes are so good. But if Fiziev comes in and he's not fully in shape and that cardio starts to dump, it could be a problem. Justin could wind up taking over and busting him up. And that's very, very likely. It's very much on the table that that happens. But I think that that first fight was so competitive, and now Fiziev has not taken nearly the amount of damage Justin has taken over the last few years, and he has sat on the shelf for a year and a few months recovering and getting healthy and resetting. And that could be actually pretty good for him. He could come in and just look better than ever and just outpoint Justin to a decision. And the other thing, Justin Gaethje and Dan Hooker was originally 5 rounds. This is a 3-round fight. Now, if it was a 5-round fight, I would probably be picking Justin, because the longer the fight goes, that's probably going to favor him. But in a 3-round fight, when their first fight was already so close and Fiziev has the youth at 32 years old in his prime, I think he can come into this fight, and I think he can get it done. You know, as long as he doesn't let Justin overwhelm him with leg kicks and land too many, the big ducking Justin shots, that he loves to do, I think Fiziev can get this done with just his speed, his reflexes, and his timing, and I think it could be another close fight. But I'm going to say Rafael Fiziev wins this fight 29-28. Now, he could come in, the cardio could look bad, he could look out of shape, it's possible, but I'm going to take an extreme leap here and say that Fiziev can get this done, and I don't think the time off will be too bad for him, since he was supposed to be rumored to be fighting earlier this month. So we're going to go ahead and pick Rafael Fiziev, even though he's been on the shelf, to beat Justin Gaethje in this fight, but it's going to be an incredible fight, and I can't wait for it. And now we are moving on up to the main event of the evening, and I cannot wait to talk about this. We are looking at the defending champ Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev. And man, I've been waiting for this fight for so long. I knew Magomed Ankalaev would make it to this belt one day. Magomed is one of the craftiest fighters in the light heavyweight division, and he has just been, an under-the-radar problem for so many years now. Magomed brings such a full package of problems to his opponents, because he is very crafty on the feet. He is southpaw. He has a missile of a left hand that, if he finds you with that left hand, it is a problem. And historically, he has won a lot of his fights by decision, but there are a few of his fights where he has knocked guys, absolutely dead. Ion Cutelaba in the first fight cracked him, hurt him, but Cutelaba started playing around, like trying to bait him. The ref thought he was hurt, stepped in, waved it off. Cutelaba cost himself, but then in the rematch, Ankalaev went, you know what, now I'm really going to have to put it on this guy, because that first fight, I'm not going to have that happen again. And he absolutely destroyed Cutelaba with a huge left hand and brutal TKO shots on the ground. Same thing with Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker in the first fight, he was winning that fight, easily winning that fight, and then he got Walker against the cage and started throwing knees, and he could not see that Walker's knee and his hand were down. So the refs separated him. I think they were over in Saudi Arabia. And they separated him. They went to the corner, and Walker said, it was a miscommunication with the doctor. He said, the doctor said, "Where are you?" And he said, "I'm in the desert." And they were in the desert, but the doctor was looking for, no, what's the name of this arena? What event are you at right now? So they waved it off. So Magomed got screwed kind of in that fight again, even though he was the one that accidentally caused the foul. But then he corrected the mistake in the rematch with Johnny Walker, blasted him with a right hand, dropped him, and then an uppercut against the cage and shattered his nose. And then you look at the fight with Jan Blachowicz, and in that fight, even though it was a close fight, a lot of people think it was a draw. It wasn't. Magomed won that fight 48-47. He won the fight 3-2. Jan won 2 rounds off leg kicks. Yes, he did bust those legs up, but Magomed came back with wrestling and better striking, and even Jan said after the fight, Magomed should have won this belt. Should have won the belt. I didn't win this fight. So, and then back even years ago, even farther than that, Magomed has not lost a fight, has not technically lost a fight in 7 years. 2018 was the last time he lost a fight, and that was a fight that he was winning, that he was dominating, and got caught at the last second in a triangle. So, Magomed has a strong case to technically be undefeated, because he was winning that Paul Craig fight and got caught at the last second. Legit loss, but he was winning that fight. And then you look at the loss to Jan Blachowicz that he should have won, and then the win against Johnny Walker that he had, but it was a miscommunication with the doctor. But Magomed is just such a tactician. He is a chess player, and he has an absolute missile of a left hand out of southpaw, and he switches stances. He will switch stance and explode with a right. He does have good, solid grappling, but he does not use his grappling hardly ever. But he's got it in his back pocket. And this misconception that I laugh at, that people think Magomed is going to come out in this fight and immediately take Alex down and just wrestle him, it's not happening. I will bet you my bank account that Ankalaev is not coming out and wrestling Pereira off the bat. He is going to stand with Pereira and prove that he can stand there and trade with him. And Magomed is crafty enough to do it. He's got good defense. He's got good head movement. He doesn't get hit much. And he's very crafty and tactical in his approach and his movements and how he sets up his left hand and how he sets up his attacks. And Alex Pereira, on the other hand, has been an absolute killer, an absolute assassin, knocking out everybody he's been fighting. Between Jamal Hill, Yuri Prohaska, I mean, it's just, Alex has looked incredible and he has looked unstoppable. And, you know, Alex fights out of orthodox, but has that deadly left hook. The deadly left hook that is just devastating everybody. And Alex is such a killer right now. But when you look at the fight, you know, Alex is 37. He's getting up there in age. You know, he's still looking great. He's not losing his step. He's still looking, I mean, deadlier than ever. But then you look at Magomed, and Magomed has finally gotten to a title shot. He's in his prime at 32. He is 21-1. And this is no question going to be the toughest fight of Alex's life. And I've said this from the beginning, this will be a chess match. You thought Alex and Khalil was tough and back and forth. This is going to be even tougher. Now, Khalil throws more shots than Ankalaev. Ankalaev sometimes, you know, he'll just kind of just sit back and just throw a shot here and there. But in this fight, he's going to have to do a little more than that. He's really going to have to get on Alex, and he's really going to have to put some combinations together and really mix it up. He can't get too behind. But that's what makes him such a chess player. You know, like, I mean, Magomed is just, he's crafty, he's sneaky, he's calculated. And in this fight, it's so interesting because I went back and forth on it so much. And I have a hard time seeing Alex knocking Magomed out. Nobody's ever even really hurt Magomed, so I cannot see Alex knocking Magomed out, even though it is a possibility. It is a possibility that he catches Magomed and blasts him and is the first person to do it. But I have a hard time seeing him knocking Magomed out cold, because I think Magomed's defense is going to be too good for that. But the other thing that Alex has to worry about is that Alex is going to get hit in this fight. He is going to get hit out of that southpaw stance by Magomed's laser of a left hand. So it's the laser straight left of Magomed versus the left hook of Pereira. And when Magomed lands that left hand, it is devastating. It is hard. It's a hammer. And there have been times in fights where he throws that left hand and he misses a guy by this much, and if he'd land that shot, they're out cold dead. So Magomed has sneaky power and Alex has power. And it's a very, very interesting fight. And, you know, I try to look at it and go, can Ankalaev land the big bomb shot that he occasionally does and knock Alex out? Because we've seen Alex knocked out cold before by Israel Adesanya. You know, so there's so many possibilities in this fight. And I could see this fight going all 25 minutes, which I think that's what's going to happen. I don't think there's going to be a knockout in this fight. I think this is going to be a 25-minute chess match. And Magomed is going to have to be on his P's and Q's with his left laser hand, his craftiness, his defense, and at some point in the fight, he might mix in a takedown. If he starts to eat some calf kicks, he might shoot a takedown. But he has got to know that Alex is going to throw these calf kicks. He's got to be prepared for it, because that's what happened in the Jan Blachowicz fight. He didn't check the calf kicks, he got his leg chewed up, and he paid for it a little bit, but he still should have won the fight. But in this fight, you cannot take leg kicks like that from Alex Pereira. So Magomed, I'm assuming, is preparing for that. And will he maybe mix in a takedown here and there to mix it up? Sure. But is he going to wrestle Alex Pereira for 25 minutes straight? Absolutely not. He will do what he said, and he will stand with Alex, and it will be a chess match. And even though I went back and forth on it, and Alex has been such a killer, he is 37 years old, and he is fighting. This is going to be the toughest fight of his life so far. And you think about it, he had a very tough competitive fight with Jan Blachowicz. Jan Blachowicz almost beat him in that fight with grappling, on the feet. You know, he was very close. And if someone like Jan Blachowicz can almost beat Alex Pereira, someone who should have beat Jan Blachowicz, like Ankalaev, I think he can too. And Ankalaev has come too far. I have called this title shot for so long, and I just cannot go against Magomed Ankalaev in this fight. And even though, he could get caught and could get blasted and Alex could get another knockout win, I'm going to say this is the toughest chess match of Alex Pereira's career, and I think it's going to go to a decision, and I think Magomed is going to take that belt. I think he'll get it 48-47. But if he does not stay active with that left hand and combinations and he doesn't get going, he could optically lose the fight to Alex by Alex coming forward and just pressing the action more and just being busier. And I hope Ankalaev doesn't lose the fight by not being busy enough, because that's possible. But I'm going to give Magomed the big chance here, and I'm going to hope that he gets this done and seals that belt that he should have gotten against Jan Blachowicz. So, Magomed Ankalaev and new. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching my video. If you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you for my predictions for 314. Take care.